don't be afraid to let go of the duds, because if it means that it's not still in line with your strategy and you've got this property that's holding you back from being able to move forward, and we've done that before. We've basically, all the negative gear properties that we have, we sold our pretty much our whole portfolio to start again, to have a better strategy to allow us to move forward. So when you are starting out in your property journey and you get to a point where you're going, oh my goodness, the properties that I have, if I often do look at it and go, if you don't have to sell property, that's great because there's all the exit costs, and look at how
Hmm.
you can best maximize that property. But if it is really a dud, like,
Hmm.
it's not a bad thing to take some losses. If you've got a good property accountant to help you structure those losses as well, it might not end up being as bad as you think. So, you know, don't think that cutting your losses is a bad thing if it allows you to move forward and purchase property that's going to be better for your strategy.
100%. I think remediation is a very, very important strategy when it comes to property investing. And I think people downplay it quite a bit because they're always scared to let go, right? It's human nature. We are always scared to
Mm.
let go. And so you buy this property, you spend, lifetime worth of effort, money, savings into buying something like this. And then you just can't let go. You're too emotionally attached to some of these things. And so you make a very important point that especially as an investor, you should be thinking strategically whether this property is adding value to your overall long term goal. And if it's not, let it go, right? It's one of
Yeah.
those painful boyfriends that you have to cut ties with, right? If it's not working, it's
Because
not
there's so
working,
many,
right?
but there's so many boyfriends. I'm not sure
um,
the boyfriend is the analogy, but I get your drift there, Moss. So let's create a bit of a checklist. Let's create a bit of a checklist for our audience to be able to go through and go, all right, I'm going
yes.
to look at all these things. Tick, 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 tick. Let's start off with, what are the things to look at when you're looking at the property? So you've got this
Let's start
property
with
there.
zones.
You might have gone to RP data and looked. Zonings. Alrighty, let's zoning. Zoning. What do you mean by zonings? Cross country zone,
So
school zone.
every suburb in it, across all of Australia has a zone attached to it. A zone basically indicates or defines what can be done with the property, right? And so it's important to understand what is the zone of your property. A lot of people don't even know or care as to what their property zone is, whereas it plays a big part in what can be done with the property, right? Whether it's a development site, could you build a high rise here? And so, how the high best use is predominantly defined by what the zone of the property would be, right? And
Mm.
so I would start there. I would basically say, well, let's look at the zone, understand what the zone entails, look at the minimum lot sizes that are available there. I'm a big believer that you should always buy properties with multiple exit strategies. And so understanding the zone basically gives you or empowers you in making those decisions around what can be done with the property in the future. Can you put a granny flat at the back? Can you subdivide this into
Mm.
two, for example? And so those zones would be quite crucial in making those decisions. What else do you
Yeah,
think would be
yeah.
important, Cheryl?
Well, the overlays in terms of what say things like, if you've got noise. So if you live near an airport, for example, like, are there bushfire? So you might even think, like, be aware. And council usually has this information. Council websites, the good council websites, will often have some sort of a planning portal or mapping portal, and put in your details, and you should be able to see all these things like the zoning and the overlays. So bushfire, for example, flood zone. These are going to indicate things where you need to maybe consider how it's going to impact your insurance. And
Definitely.
and if you're going to be building something in a bushfire zone, for example, that's also going to increase your build costs, because you've got different levels of quality of building materials that you've got to use. So heritage as well. So there'll be areas, I know in Brisbane there's certain heritage areas you can't touch the type of property, even in terms of renovation or development. So be aware that these overlays are there. They're not necessarily all restrictive. It's just knowing that you've got an airport overlay that you might have visited it when there were no planes going over, but then when the planes go over, it feels like a road train's gonna crash into your house. So you don't want that either.
Yes. Yes.
So overlays are a good one to note and just be aware of. Insurance is a real big one at the moment, Moss. I'm not sure if you've seen that, particularly with a lot
Yes,
of
with the
properties
floods.
in New South Wales and Brisbane, sorry, in Queensland, where it might look on a sunny day and everything else, it might look absolutely fine. Really important that you ring up the insurance companies and ask them how they're treating those properties in those areas as well, because those premiums might have been, and even if it doesn't flood, even if that property doesn't flood because it's in a particular suburb, that might have issues with insurance as well.